Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are undertaking, well, a critical and frankly a very difficult deep dive. We're looking into some really complex and dark terrain in the modern online world. We are analyzing a digital threat that sits at this horrifying yet increasingly interconnected intersection. Violent extremism combined with severe predatory behavior. We are talking about the sprawling international online organization known in the reports as the 764 Network.
That's right. It's a disturbing nexus.
Our sources for this deep dive, just so you know, are built entirely on law enforcement reports, comprehensive analytical documents detailing investigations, and findings from massive international cooperation efforts. This includes crucial data from organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. So these aren't just summaries, they're, deep dives into the operational structure of a major threat.
Exactly. These are the findings from the front lines, essentially.
Our mission today is to synthesize everything known about this network. We need to understand its chilling origins, its resilient, sort of Hydra-like structure, its terrifyingly sophisticated psychological manipulation tactics, and of course, the current international response mobilized against it. Our goal is to understand not just what this group is, but how it manages to operate with such scale, and really try to grasp the depth of the danger it presents to vulnerable minors globally.
What's fascinating here is how the existence and persistence of this network fundamentally challenge conventional definitions of, well, organized crime and terrorism. It's kind of a hybrid. The documents we've reviewed are comprehensive. They detail the complex, adaptive, and geographically unbounded nature of these modern online organizations. The knowledge we extract today is absolutely crucial if you seek to understand emerging resilient threats in the online space. Threats that, bypass traditional security measures by exploiting the most fundamental of human vulnerabilities, the need for acceptance and belonging.
That exploitation seems key. So let's start right at the core with the official classification, because this is where the complexity really begins, isn't it? The 764 Network is formally classified by international authorities as a decentralized international online group that is in fact a violent extremist organization, or VEO. That is a weighty designation.
It is a very serious label. But what makes them uniquely difficult to combat is that specific blend you mentioned earlier. The network is described in the reports as nihilistic. It blends elements of extremism, specifically antisocial, anti-government, and sort of chaos-driven rhetoric, with highly organized predatory behavior.
They use this umbrella of extremism to facilitate four primary activities: sextortion, sophisticated grooming, coercion into acts of self-harm and violence, and the large-scale production and circulation of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM.
So the question then becomes, is the extremism the ultimate goal, or is it just a sophisticated vehicle for the sadistic control and exploitation? The reports seem to wrestle with that distinction, don't they? That's the critical analytical tension you see within the documents, yeah. While the group definitely promotes the destruction of societal norms through criminal acts, often linked to satanic or occult themes in some of its iterations, promoting chaos and violence, the underlying motivation appears to be primarily sadistic control and exploitation. The nihilistic ideology, it acts as the binding agent. It sort of strips away the moral framework of the perpetrators, giving them a justification for these depraved actions. And at the same time, it provides a twisted sense of purpose or belonging for the extremely vulnerable victims they target.
Like an ideological Trojan horse, almost.
Exactly. It's used to seize absolute power over individuals.
And before we get much further, we should probably quickly address the name itself, 7 and 64. It seems almost, anticlimactic, given the scope of their crimes.
It does, doesn't it? The reports indicate the name is actually derived from a phone area code. Possibly a nod to their origins in North American chat rooms, maybe? But it has evolved far beyond that geographic marker now. It's transformed from just a simple area code into a recognizable brand or symbol for this loose-knit collective focused on this unique blend of nihilism and predation.
Okay, now let's focus on the targets, because this seems absolutely essential to understanding their methodology.
Absolutely critical. The primary focus is overwhelmingly minors, particularly those aged 8 to 17. The sources confirm a systematic effort to seek out and exploit highly vulnerable teenagers. We're talking about individuals struggling with diagnosed mental health issues, deep-seated depression, isolation, body image issues, or kids simply seeking any form of online community or validation that they feel they lack in the real world. It's predatory targeting at its core.
And they're actively searching, not just waiting.
Oh, absolutely. The documents emphasize that 764 does not wait for targets to stumble upon them. They actively hunt for them. They use specific keywords, they monitor group chats focused on mental health struggles, and identify individuals posting about self-harm or feelings of hopelessness. They weaponize that natural human desire for connection.
Right. Now, tracing the group's lineage, this wasn't a sudden, spontaneous emergence, was it? The sources connect 764 back to an established, dark online ecosystem.
That's right. It didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Exactly. The reports trace the 764 network's origins back to around 2021. It started as an offshoot of an earlier, notoriously disturbing online group called CVLT, which is often stylized as cult. This precursor group was already operating in that highly niche and disturbing space of graphic content sharing, extreme self-harm glorification, and general ideological extremism.
Yeah, CBLT and similar precursor groups were foundational. They established the toxic culture and the initial network of participants. CBLT was known for requiring members to prove their dedication by sharing highly specific, often highly illegal content, sort of a barrier to entry. When the 764 network splintered off, it formalized and weaponized those earlier chaotic tendencies. They drew heavily from nihilistic philosophies and idolized figures associated with mass violence and chaos, adopting them as sort of digital martyrs.
So they built on what came before.
Precisely. And crucially, the sources note that 764 absorbed operational elements and sophisticated tactics from even older predecessor networks. They specifically mention groups like 676 and the even more obscure Harm Nation. These earlier groups specialized in digital harassment and early forms of online coercion. By drawing from these predecessors, 764 didn't have to invent its playbook from scratch. It simply enhanced an already established ecosystem of digital depravity, focusing its efforts specifically on streamlining the grooming and exploitation of the highly vulnerable. This evolutionary jump is what makes them so dangerous today.
So 764 is essentially the next generation, maybe, of a long line of digital threats, having learned from the failures and disruptions of its predecessors.
That's a good way to put it. They learned, they adapted.
Okay, that inheritance of knowledge brings us directly to their structure, which you mentioned is the biggest challenge for law enforcement agencies worldwide. The documents stress that traditional criminal organizations rely on clear, top-down hierarchies. But 764 operates on a fundamentally decentralized, fluid model.
Exactly. Fluid is the keyword there.
When you say decentralized, what does that mean practically for a member? Does it mean there's no single target for law enforcement to, take out?
Precisely. It lacks a formal, fixed hierarchy, but it's not truly leaderless either. It features self-proclaimed leaders, or maybe orchestrators. These are individuals who gain notoriety or power within the network by demonstrating proficiency in grooming, sharing high-quality illegal material, or successfully executing coercive acts. They orchestrate activities and share instructions, but these commands flow exclusively through informal, encrypted chat platforms. Things like hardened Telegram channels or private, invitation-only Discord servers.
Okay.
And this decentralized, shifting command structure is the key to their resilience. If we analyze why this matters, when law enforcement successfully disrupts a major encrypted channel or arrests a high-profile leader in one country, the subgroups immediately splinter. They just reform under a slightly new name on different platforms, often maintaining contact with core trusted members via parallel redundant communication channels.
That's the mechanism of the Hydra-like structure described in the reports then. Cut off one head and it regrows. But how fast does this regeneration actually happen? Are we talking months?
Yeah.
Weeks?
It is shockingly fast, often within hours or days. The documents emphasize that core members are trained in operational security and platform migration. OPSEC is paramount. They don't rely on central servers, they rely on distributed, human-centered networks of trust built on shared criminality. The disruption of an arrest only briefly interrupts the operational tempo of the network as a whole because the methodology, the playbook, is already widely distributed. This allows pretty much anyone with the inclination to step up and resume the exploitation activities. This ability to instantly adapt makes tracking membership and identifying leadership a Sisyphean task for investigators.
A nightmare for law enforcement. And this resilient structure has allowed them to achieve a truly global footprint, right?
Absolutely.
Reports confirm its international reach is terrifyingly broad. They specifically note active members and victims in the U.S., extensive networks across various parts of Europe, and operational nodes that extend significantly beyond those areas. We're seeing documented activity in parts of Asia and South America, too. This is a truly worldwide problem. It requires that kind of Interpol-level response.
Definitely. And what's particularly alarming about their global reach is where they choose to operate most effectively. They are not restricted to the isolation and, frankly, the lower traffic of the dark web. They actively choose mainstream platforms. This includes the major communication hubs we all use, Discord, Telegram, but also widely used, often loosely moderated, social media apps.
But why mainstream platforms? Wouldn't the dark web offer greater anonymity from law enforcement scrutiny? Seems counterintuitive.
You'd think so, but it offers isolation, and 764 prioritizes accessibility and, victim density. Law enforcement sources explain that the dark web is excellent for hardened criminals talking to each other, but it's terrible for recruitment. Mainstream platforms allow them to blend in, posing convincingly as peers, mentors, or even legitimate community organizers. This greatly enhances their ability to execute that initial grooming phase, which relies entirely on building trust.
Makes sense. Lowering the barrier to first contact.
Exactly. Furthermore, the reports highlight the specific use of highly popular youth-centric apps for recruitment: Instagram, Snapchat, and critically, platforms like Roblox. These are environments where young people spend hours socializing and where the group can operate hidden in plain sight, making them difficult for automated systems to flag and nearly impossible for concerned parents to monitor entirely. It's insidious.
This circles right back to the psychological entry point. We have to reiterate the precision of their targeting strategy here. It seems crucial.
It is. The reports state clearly the process is clinical. It's methodical. The group specifically targets teens dealing with the very common issues we discussed: depression, body image issues, bullying. They use social media searches and monitor group chats to filter for markers of vulnerability. They know what to look for.
So they're scanning for digital breadcrumbs of distress.
Pretty much. Once identified, they successfully draw these vulnerable young people in with persuasive promises of community, acceptance, and an emotional connection that they're desperately seeking. This is the critical psychological entry point. They are masters of social engineering, filling a profound emotional void by offering a sense of inclusion, however twisted, that leads rapidly to compliance and trust. The technological resilience of the Hydra structure is really just the infrastructure supporting this chilling mastery of human emotional manipulation.
Okay, so that structure enables the methods. Let's dig into those methods now. The success seems directly linked to these operational tactics. The reports explain that 764 members employ highly developed, standardized psychological manipulation tactics, often referred to as their playbooks, to efficiently target and control victims globally. We need to break down these mechanisms, focusing on the 4 primary criminal activities documented in the reports.
Right. Let's look at the first 2 methods, which really form the foundation of their control. The first is grooming and sextortion. The process isn't random. It follows a standardized script, more or less. Predators first initiate contact with minors, engaging in intense love bombing. That's an immediate, overwhelming display of affection and validation designed to establish quick, deep emotional reliance. They pose convincingly as peers or older, understanding mentors.
Building that false trust fast.
Exactly. Once the emotional connection is forged, the escalation begins, guided by these playbooks. They coerce victims into sending explicit images or videos, often under the guise of shared intimacy or trust exercises. And here's where the power dynamic shifts irrevocably. These sensitive materials are instantly weaponized and used as blackmail. The blackmail is almost never for simple monetary gain, by the way. Its purpose is to force continued compliance, silence, obedience, and deepening involvement in the network's activities. The victim basically has to perform or risk exposure and total isolation.
That weaponization of the images then leads directly into the second, and arguably even more shocking, stage of coercion.
It does. It's a deliberate escalation. The second method is coercion into harm. Because the network's true aim seems to be this nihilistic control, victims are quickly pressured to engage in horrific self-destructive acts. This might start with low-level compliance testing, like requiring self-harm cutting or burning, but it rapidly escalates. It escalates to animal abuse or even violent acts against other people in the victim's life or their community.
That's horrifying. And there's a mechanism for enforcing this.
Yes, and the shocking detail that surfaced across multiple international reports is the system used to enforce this coercion. These sessions often require live streaming the acts. Multiple network members watch the victim, sometimes dozens of them, and actively encourage the escalation of the abuse using real-time pressure and feedback. This turns what might be a private act of coercion into a public, performative requirement of their membership or continued safety from exposure. If the victim hesitates, they face immediate threats of doxing or having their images distributed. This collective, instantaneous enforcement mechanism is highly effective at destroying the victim's autonomy.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, from an organizational perspective. The methods seem to shift from controlling an individual victim to actually maintaining the organization itself. The third activity you mentioned is the highly organized production and distribution of CSAM.
That's right. It serves an internal function, too.
The sources are chillingly clear here. The network isn't just passively collecting illegal material. They are actively orchestrating its production, often involving scenarios of extreme cruelty designed specifically to shock and maintain group cohesion. They are essentially a content factory dedicated to the worst forms of exploitation.
Exactly. And this material serves a crucial dual internal purpose. First, it's distributed internally to maintain the bond among existing members. Sharing illegal material acts as a shared criminal secret, reinforcing loyalty and mutual complicity. Second, and more disturbingly, it's often used as a requirement for entry or to prove loyalty for new members, a kind of initiation rite. This ensures that anyone joining is instantly complicit in serious crimes, making them controllable and highly unlikely to ever inform authorities. It's a self-perpetuating, self-policing criminal mechanism that keeps the Hydra fed, so to speak.
Creates its own internal gravity, locking people in. And finally, we have the fourth category, the extremist elements. This is what gives the VEO classification its teeth, right?
Precisely. This is where the violent extremism label really comes into play.
Some of the network's activities openly incorporate severe threats of terrorism or mass violence, specifically citing high-profile targets or events. Their stated ideological goal, echoing those nihilistic roots, is to seek to destroy civilized society through chaos, mass violence, and crime. They actively discuss and sometimes plan these acts, moving the threat far beyond mere online deviance and crossing the threshold into organized domestic terror threats in some cases.
Absolutely. And to intimidate and control both victims and potential investigators or whistleblowers, the reports detail a long list of ancillary crimes. These aren't just idle threats, they are executed crimes, including organized cyberstalking operations, sophisticated doxing campaigns against perceived enemies or non-compliant victims, and the issuance of interstate threats targeting families or authorities. It's comprehensive intimidation.
Okay, now let's talk about the efficiency that makes this whole global operation run so smoothly, despite the chaos it promotes. Beyond using encrypted platforms to evade detection, you mentioned the real chilling efficiency lies in those playbooks.
Yes, the playbooks are key to scaling the operation.
Can you give us more detail on what these playbooks actually look like? Are we talking about literal, step-by-step scripts, like a call center guide for predators?
Essentially, yes. That's a grim but accurate analogy. They are standardized operating procedures. They can include things like flowcharts for emotional manipulation, pre-written responses to specific victim objections or questions, and even timelines for escalation. For example, introduce self-harm coercion after 14 days of initial compliance. This kind of system helps to automate and standardize the effectiveness of the interactions, regardless of which low-level member is actually the point of contact. It turns highly specialized psychological manipulation into a reproducible, mass-market crime.
Making it scalable and less reliant on individual talent.
Exactly. Furthermore, the documents detail a growing technological advancement within 764. They are reportedly utilizing AI and basic bots in their early-stage operations now. Now, this isn't for conducting deep, personalized grooming, well, not yet anyway, but rather for efficiency gains. These tools automate the initial filtering of vulnerable targets, scour social media for specific distress signals, and handle initial generic outreach messages. This drastically enhances the network's reach and lowers the required expertise for individual exploiters to get started.
That's deeply disturbing. The industrialization of grooming. Okay, let's shift to the impact. The impact of these synchronized criminal activities on the victims, who are often children already struggling with profound isolation, must be devastating.
Yeah.
And the reports quantify this, right?
They do, in stark terms. The operations of the 764 network have caused irreparable damage. This includes verified reports of multiple suicides directly linked to the network's coercion, severe psychological damage requiring long-term institutional care, and grievous physical injuries resulting from coerced self-harm among those targeted. The toll is immense.
And we have data backing this up.
Yes, the scale is huge, and we have the data to confirm it. Organizations like NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is the primary recipient of cyber tip line reports in the U.S., have documented thousands of related cyber tip line submissions linking directly back to 764 activities and specific members. These reports detail the distribution of CSAM, grooming attempts, and credible threats of self-harm or violence. This high volume of reports underlines the network's industrial scale of victimization globally.
Just thousands of rewards flowing in.
And what's particularly cruel, as the reports document, is that the group's operations actively seek to exacerbate existing mental health crises. They don't just exploit existing trauma, they actively fuel it, coercing victims into escalating self-harm or violent acts that tragically lead to hospitalization or, in the worst documented cases, death. The FBI and international partners globally label this network as a multifaceted threat because the combination of child exploitation and violent extremism challenges traditional law enforcement approaches, which are typically siloed into one specialty or the other. This group crosses those lines deliberately.
So given that scale and the sophisticated, multifaceted nature of the threat, what did the mobilization effort look like from the authorities? It must have been significant.
It had to be. The scale of the problem demanded a coordinated, high-level response. The FBI, for instance, has opened over 250 separate investigations that are directly linked to the 764 network's activities. They've labeled it a major, growing concern. This high prioritization is largely due to its success in recruiting members and targeting victims on those extremely popular everyday platforms we mentioned, like Roblox and Discord. They're meeting kids where they are.
Right. And this led to specific operations.
Yes. This response culminated in the official launch of Operation Restore Justice back in May 2025. Now, this wasn't just a standard operation. It was a nationwide FBI effort specifically designed to proactively identify and arrest child predators who operate within this VEO context, and, more critically, to directly attack the organizational infrastructure and leadership of resilient networks like 764. It recognized that just targeting individual predators wasn't enough. The network itself had to be dismantled.
A focus on the network structure itself. Did it yield results quickly?
It began yielding significant results almost immediately, yes. And the arrests really highlight the sheer severity and the ideological underpinning of the offenses. Back in April 2025, right before the formal launch of Restore Justice, key orchestrators and self-proclaimed leaders of the network were arrested. These individuals weren't just lone wolves. They were operating a global child exploitation enterprise and, as noted in the sources, were actively seeking to destabilize society through violence. This confirms it wasn't just individual predation. It was coordinated crime with a clear ideological objective behind it.
And this is where we must pause and look at the absolute worst outcomes documented in the reports. These connect the online psychological coercion directly to physical, real-world crimes. Take the harrowing case of the 21-year-old Arizona man arrested in October 2025. His charges just illustrate the unprecedented and sprawling nature of the network's criminal reach. It's staggering.
This specific case is crucial, absolutely chilling, because it demonstrates the ultimate consequence of the network's coercive structure. The individual faced an expansive list of felony charges, multiple counts of child exploitation, material support for terrorism, CSAM production, cyberstalking, kidnapping, animal torture, wire fraud, and murder.
Murder. Directly linked.
Yes. This isn't just a random list of offenses. It's a window into the 764 method. The kidnapping and murder charges stem from the real-world execution of acts that were likely coerced or demanded by the online network as proof of loyalty or performance. The fact that an individual linked directly to 764 was charged with murder confirms that the nihilistic rhetoric translates directly into horrific, tangible, real-world violence. It makes the network far, far more than just an online threat. The lines are completely blurred.
And that severity wasn't an isolated incident either, was it?
Well,
Also in October 2025, a 19-year-old California man connected to 764 pleaded guilty. His charges included animal crushing, which is tied directly to those coercion into harm methods, minor exploitation, CSAM possession, and cyberstalking. Another wide range.
Exactly. These cases are vital evidence. They demonstrate that the real-world consequences of participation in the network are swift and severe, resulting in accountability for a dizzying array of crimes, all stemming from those centralized psychological playbooks developed and distributed by the network's core members. The arrests send a clear message, or at least aim to. The online anonymity the network promises its members is largely an illusion. Actions have consequences.
Okay, so significant arrests, major operations. But you mentioned resilience earlier. Let's get into recent developments in the ongoing fight.
Right. Despite these significant arrests of orchestrators and high-level members, we absolutely must return to that concept of resilience. The reports consistently reiterate that the network's Hydra-like structure ensures its persistence. Disrupting the command infrastructure is necessary, yes, but it does not eliminate the ideology or the operational methods overnight. The threat continually evolves and splinters. New cells pop up.
So if tactical arrests alone are the complete solution, what's the next step in the counter strategy? You mentioned international cooperation increased dramatically.
Yes, that's been a key development. The complexity of the network forced a crucial shift toward much deeper interagency and non-governmental collaboration. Law enforcement has had to partner much more closely with non-governmental organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, and the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, or ISD. These groups bring a unique expertise in tracking online extremist ideology and mapping decentralized networks, which complements traditional law enforcement skills.
How does that partnership work in practice?
Well, specifically, these non-governmental groups provide crucial analytical intelligence. They help law enforcement map the connections between splinter cells, identify ideological shifts within the network, and this aids in the preemptive disruption of new 764 variants before they can fully establish operational tempo. This hybrid approach, combining traditional policing with ideological and network analysis intelligence, is really becoming the new standard for tackling these kinds of threats.
And this issue has risen right to the highest levels of federal attention in the U.S.
It has.
A major institutional focus came in November 2025, as the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, centered its efforts on dismantling 764 specifically. Attorney General Pamela Bondi publicly emphasized the federal commitment to, quote, dismantle this network and bring offenders to justice. This public prioritization signals that the 764 network is now viewed as one of the most critical online threats facing vulnerable youth today. It's not just another online group.
No, it reflects the sheer gravity of the problem. But the fight also extends beyond official channels, which is interesting. We're seeing a critical public and sort of semi-public response. Media coverage, like from outlets such as Cyberscoop, continues to track and report consistently on the federal custody cases and the ongoing prosecution of 764 members. This keeps public pressure intense, which is vital for maintaining the focus and resources of law enforcement.
Right, public awareness matters. And then we also see the wild card element, hacktivist groups getting involved.
Precisely. Hacktivist groups, most famously anonymous, have targeted 764 through operations like #OpChildSafety. Now, these interventions are complicated, obviously. They exist outside the legal framework, but they often focus on publicly exposing members, sometimes releasing communication logs or platform details. While law enforcement certainly can't endorse these activities, the information gathered by these groups has, in several documented instances, actually provided crucial leads and intelligence that aided formal law enforcement investigations into the network structure and members. It's an unusual but sometimes effective element in the overall response strategy.
An unpredictable force multiplier, maybe.
Perhaps. If we connect all this to the bigger picture, the entire 764 saga really underscores the immense danger inherent in the modern digital landscape. This is a complete convergence of online extremism and sophisticated, highly automated child exploitation. It creates this multifaceted threat that is technologically and psychologically advanced, one that traditional law enforcement structures were not initially built to handle easily. It forces global partners to continually adapt, coordinate, and adopt analytical approaches that recognize the network's greatest strength: its uncanny ability to weaponize basic human emotional weakness like loneliness.
Okay. This deep dive into the 764 network has been, well, heavy, but absolutely necessary for understanding the contours of this specific digital threat. The key takeaways for you as a listener are multi-layered. First, the fundamental shift from traditional criminal hierarchy to these resilient, decentralized, Hydra-like structures ensures the network's longevity despite arrests. Second, the network's primary success hinges on deploying sophisticated psychological playbooks on mainstream platforms to quickly and efficiently groom vulnerable targets. And finally, the grim reality is that nihilistic extremist goals intersecting with child exploitation results in extreme, real-world violence, as evidenced by those murder and kidnapping charges faced by its members. It's not just online.
Absolutely not just online.
The sources consistently stress the critical importance of vigilance, particularly around young people who are exhibiting signs of severe loneliness or mental health struggles, as these are the exact vulnerabilities the network is designed to exploit. If you or someone you know suspects involvement with or victimization by this network, or similar groups, the immediate importance is contacting organizations like NCMSC or the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. Reporting is crucial.
It really is. And just a final thought here. While the ongoing arrests are significant tactical wins that bring crucial justice to victims and dismantle key cells, this type of decentralized network demonstrates that successful long-term disruption requires more than just dismantling the infrastructure. It's not just about taking down servers or arresting leaders. It requires a profound societal effort to identify and address the vulnerability pipeline that feeds these groups in the first place. We have to address the root causes. This raises an important, maybe uncomfortable question for all of us to consider. What does it truly mean for the future of online safety when the primary currency of highly effective global recruitment is simply loneliness and the false promise of belonging?